to Leadership. Welcome everyone to Leadership IQ, being a better human and a testing leader in the age of AI. My name is Jen Bonine. I will be your moderator facilitator for this session that we will be having today around this topic. Would love for you guys to throw some questions if you have them in the chat so that we can get those addressed besides just the content and topics that I'll be giving to you today. So I believe that we have 2 hours for our session. Does that sound right to everyone else? So we will do a 2-hour session on this, and we'll make sure and take a break as well, because I like to give you guys breaks so we don't go straight through. I'm going to give you some homework on the break of some things to watch or check out. So there will be some quick research / homework topics for you guys during the break times that we'll take. So just know that as well. Any other questions before we get started? I'll check in the chat, see if I see anything. Not seeing anything yet. Okay, we look like we're good. We'll get started. All right, so we will get started with our content. So here's one of the things that's changed when we talk about testing and leadership now with what we're dealing with. What we've seen in the last 18 months is that a lot of what was the norm was significantly changed or tipped upside down inside of our organizations, our teams, our companies, impacting different people in many different ways. Whether that was an impact to your professional career, and there was a lot of companies that struggled during the last 18 months, or some companies were doing quite well during that time, but they weren't able to meet in person. Teams were now working out of their homes. People had to deal with, while working out of their homes, changes to childcare, accessibility, the ability to have their kids working and doing school from home. We also had a lot of folks who had elderly parents or other folks that they were worried about in their lives, whether that was, friends or family members or parents that people were concerned about. So what this allowed us to do as a society, and the trend we're seeing here because of it, is that what ended up happening is we dismantled a lot of limiting beliefs and we changed some things. So there's a lot of companies that said you had to work from the office, right? They thought we all had to be in an office and be working from those offices in order to be productive. And what we found through the pandemic was that wasn't necessarily the case. Some organizations had already known this. They were on board with it. They were supporting employees in working remotely, but not every workspace was. So they had to figure out new ways of doing things. So that means, fast forward to all of us, and I'll show this through some of the studies, is that it accelerated the adoption of what is called smart automation and AI and ML in terms of testing itself. So we've been using AI and machine learning in a lot of companies for things like virtual assistants, in terms of call centers, help desks. So when you go in to ask some questions, you get a chat bot that talks to you. That chat bot's actually not a person, it's a chat bot. So it's AI powered around questions that people ask. A lot of people were using AI for sentiment analysis, which just means you go through all of the reviews that your company or app or organization gets online in various places. And then what you do is you take a look at those reviews, you analyze them, and you summarize what the sentiment was. So there's different types of AI that was already being used, but this last 18 months really pushed AI to now be a part of everyday usage in testing organizations and teams as well. So that's kind of where we sit today. What this allows us to do, and this is something that's good for all of us to do, I think, in our careers. I was given this advice by several CEOs that lead large companies, very large tech companies, when I work with them in those organizations. And one of the things that they said is incredibly helpful and positive for us to do is take a checkpoint once or twice a year to make sure that we understand where we sit, and assess what we want to continue, what is serving us well, what are the things that don't serve us well that we don't want to do, and where are we going. So these C-level executives, and these are very high-level individuals in companies, had said you do this kind of formal checkpoint. So the formal checkpoint, you ask yourself a set of 3 to 4 questions, and you write these answers down so you can come back to it, store it digitally somewhere or write it down physically if that helps you. I know some people like physical journals versus digital, but either digitally or physically write down the answers as a leader so that it helps point and guide you as you're making decisions throughout that year. So the first question is, what are you proud of? So the idea here is you look back at the last year or the last 6 months, if you're doing it twice a year, and you say, what did we do really well? What am I proud of that I was able to accomplish as a leader? What have I done that was a really big accomplishment? Because a lot of times what happens is we don't reflect back as leaders on what we did well. We're always looking at what we didn't do well and what we want to change and how we do better, which is great too for learning. But you also need to catalog the things you did do well, so you make sure to do more of those things, or to make sure you're paying attention to the things that you are doing well, and then really focus on those areas that you're struggling. The second question is, what have you learned? So I would ask you guys now, just if you're listening, to start jotting some of these thoughts down just for yourself. We're sitting in July, almost July, tomorrow. We're almost in July. So that means we're 6 months through the year. So we're 6 months into 2021. I know most of us wanted 2020 to end as fast as it could. The sentiment across the globe when we hit 2021 at New Year's was just a collective global sigh of relief, I think, that we had made it through 2020 and we were into this new year. And so we're now 6 months in. What are you proud of? So catalog the things. Maybe you're proud of the fact that you were able to get your teams to effectively collaborate remotely. Maybe you're proud that you were able to keep all of your teams working. Maybe you're proud that you still have all the members of your team that you had prior to this starting. The next one is, what have you learned? So here we look at, what are the lessons we want to take from the last 6 months that we want to continue to apply? So what were those big aha moments or lessons learned that we want to make sure that we take note of? Now, for some people, I've been having a lot of conversations with executives and leadership who have learned that their teams actually are more productive when they're not always in the office. So they're looking at ways to go to more hybridized approaches for their employees and their teams to not work just in an office, but to be able to work a combination, or what they're calling concurrent hybridization. So I know that's, if you haven't heard that term before, it's called concurrent hybridization, which really just means you're working in the office sometimes and you're working distance sometimes. So you always have some people in the office and some people remote. So you're building a way of working that enables people seamlessly to transition between in and out of the office and still be connected and working together. So that's something that we're seeing more of. We're also seeing a lot of people learned that maybe they want to work from different places. Maybe they're in, Europe for 6 months. Maybe they work from the US for 6 months when the borders open up, but moving around instead of staying in one place. So also companies that are able to take advantage and optimize working with employees who are able to move locations and still work for the same company is another thing that we're seeing as an emerging trend. So I would just ask you to think about for yourselves, what have you learned that you want to keep? Some people have learned they want more balance in their work and their life, where they want to shut off at a certain time. They don't want to use devices in the evening. Those types of things. The reason you write them down is now that the world's shifting back, people are opening up, things are changing. What can happen is you go back, if you don't catalog those lessons and remember what you've learned, you go back to the way that it was, and that doesn't move you forward, right? You'll regress or revert backwards when you want to be moving forwards. What could you optimize if you were to start the year over again, knowing what you know now? Now, this is what a lot of us in QA and quality are usually really good at, right? We're good at looking at, once we have all the data, saying what went wrong, what should we have done differently, what are the backup plans we should have had in place, what are we going to do now so that that doesn't happen again? I'll give you an example. During this last 18 months, and particularly in 2020, a lot of people weren't as prepared for a global pandemic and what happened as they could have been. So maybe that means their organization didn't have strategies around what happens if we have to not come back to the office for 6 to 12 months. How do we handle that? What are the protocols and procedures to do that and to notify people of that? What are the things that are important that we do in relation to that? So what I would tell you is, look at what the last year brought for you as a team, you as a leader, or you as a company, and think about now having all this knowledge. What do you want to do differently? Do you want to have better plans in place? Do you need more technology? Um, and did you need the access basically to your employees? Did you have the right systems in place to connect your teams together, to get information distance, to not have them in the office? So those types of things. Think about that now that you know all of that data and information. And then what lessons can you take with you for the next part of the journey? So there's some things we learned in the last 18 months that we want to take with us, and we want to make sure that we continue to implement or we put in place going forward. So this is all about, what do we do from here and how do we manage forward what we want to have happen in our teams. Maybe we did learn that our teams are more productive, like I said earlier, when they're not always in the office, when they get to rotate in and out of the office. So if that does work for us, how do we implement that successfully long term for our teams? Maybe for some team members, it works best to have them in person. So we know we're going to keep those people in the office. Maybe working out of the office becomes a reward for those individuals who are highly productive and can handle it. But those are some of the things as leaders that you're going to need to come up with and decide those types of things inside of your teams. I do know someone got kicked out of the webinar before we started and missed part of the first part of it. This is being recorded. So Committed Ed Tech will be able to get you the recording, Nithya. So just making sure that anyone who joined us a little bit late, there is a recording that they'll produce post this. I'll stop for a second here. Hopefully you guys took down these checkpoint questions. I would put them somewhere either digitally in your phone or written down so that you're doing this with yourselves. So as leaders, you can do this for your team where you're talking about what are you proud of your team did? What did your team learn? What could you optimize with the team? What lessons is the team taking away? But I especially find for those of you that are looking to make upward momentum and moves in your career, if you're looking for career advancement, if you want to take on that next level opportunity or job, one of the things that's very consistent in top leaders in organizations is they do a lot of work and self-reflection on what are they doing well, what are they proud of, what have they learned, these questions that I'm giving you. This is something they do with themselves to really challenge moving forward. What we see a lot of times is we can get stuck. We can get stuck in what we're doing. We keep doing the same things. We have these habits and patterns. Some of them are good, but some of them don't help us as leaders advance in our careers. So, for a long time in my career, I worked with top C-level executives across the world that were in high tech careers. And we were working on implementing tech and new tech before and as it was coming out. And a lot of times they would ask me, we would have these conversations about new tech that needed to be implemented, the types of things they were going to put into their teams. And, the other questions that would come up is things like, Jennifer, I've been in this company for a few years. I've been a manager, I've been a director. I'm just stuck now. I'm not progressing. I'm now just stuck at the senior director level. I can't break into that vice president level or C level. I'm not moving. Why is that happening? And a lot of times, when we see kind of that stagnation or that lack of movement in your career, is not doing some of these self-reflection techniques or taking the time to understand what you want to change or how you want to operate differently to be visible for those next level positions. Because just like running for political office or political campaigns, it takes time and strategy to be able to achieve running for office or getting that position. So, same thing in your leadership career. Think of it as you need to have a strategy around what you're trying to achieve, your goals, and then a roadmap of how you're getting there. And part of that starts with analysis and reflection of who you are as a leader and what skills you need to bring in that you may not already have as a leader. So, one thing I would also tell you as leaders for your teams is that what happens a lot, is that we think about our teams and their productivity, in a very linear fashion. In that, if we're able to give our teams more tools, if we're able to automate the process that our team uses, if we're able to optimize the way that our team is working through things like Trello boards and Jira tickets, and we're able to get more points out of them, right? We're optimizing and making the team better. But what we find is, besides that, where it really moves the needle for companies, besides just implementing new technologies or processes, is focusing on the team itself. So, especially right now when we're distance and more digital. So, maybe let me know, raise your hands or tell me if you currently are back to work in your office or if you're remote. So, just tell me in office or remote in the chat. If everyone could just type that so we can just see a quick little poll of who's back in the office and who is still working remotely in their companies. So just pop in the chat, in office or remote. We'll be able to see it. Hopefully we can see the chat. Everyone got that? It's just a quick, easy way for me to see if you guys are in office or remote. We've got one remote, one in office so far. So we've got a tie. Let's have some other folks throw in office or remote, just so we can see if more people are still remote or if you guys are working from the office. I will tell you, remote takes more effort in this space of connectivity with your teams. So throw in the chat remote or in office if you could. We want to know what you guys are doing out there. I know we have quite a few folks on the webinar here, so just throw in the chat if you get a chance. But here's what I want to tell you about your teams. So if you really want to see really good connectivity in your teams, if you want to see really good momentum and drive impactful velocity. So a lot of teams want to achieve really nice velocity metrics around how quickly their teams are able to react and produce output and be productive for the company. So what we are seeing is, if you can make sure your teams are better connected, that they will outperform other non-connected teams by up to 3 times as much. So what that basically means is that teams who feel connected to one another, who know what everyone's strengths and weaknesses are on the team, who know what people are good at, who know who to go to when they need help or have a question. They're going to ask for help when they need it sooner than other teams. So they're going to avoid wasting that time not knowing where to go or who to talk to. So what's important here is that you look at and you analyze, how connected is my team? Could I optimize how much they feel connected to one another? Many of us may have even hired people during this time where they've never met in person. They've never had a chance to sit across from each other. They don't really know each other that well. You know, they've never been in the physical office that they work in because they've been completely remote. So there's a lot of challenges with that. And so as leaders, one of the things we can do is build those stronger relationships. People with better relationships with their team and with their leaders rely on each other more in times of need or crisis. So they're going to come when they have a problem. I'll give you a real example of this. We were working on the very first esports system that went into play. So there was a gaming company that was spinning up the very first esports league with their game. So it was their game they had built. It was going to be connected to the streaming platform that they were going to use to do all of the streaming for the esports tournaments that they were going to utilize. Now, streaming an esports tournament, anyone who's a gamer, or even if you're not a gamer, there's something called Twitch reflexes, and things happen in fractions of seconds in gaming. So you can have all different types of things and stats that are being captured and collected in fractions of seconds in video games. What happens in live sports is the moves aren't quite as quick as what you see in esports. So in video games, you need those extra decimal points after the seconds to catch very succinctly the moves that are being made and to not have a lag between what people are watching on the screen to what the statistics are showing. Imagine watching a live basketball game, let's just call it, and the stats or the score was behind by about a second or two from when you actually saw the shot hit. It would be very distracting to the audience. You want those stats synced up very tightly with what's actually happening in the game. And so what had happened was the streaming platform we were using for this particular esport game had been used for live sports. The people who had produced the streaming platform, if you're familiar with the US, were located on the East Coast in New York. The people with the game were located in LA on the West Coast of the US. So you had these two very distinct teams working together to try and work on a common goal, but being distanced by West and East Coast in the US and having two very different backgrounds. One of them being in live sports, which are very different, as I just mentioned, than esports and how that's done. So we had a very big strategy meeting on how we were going to accomplish making sure that our stats were synced up, what would happen with that, how everything looked. We had two key engineers that were going to go build part of that platform so that the rest of the team could start building their components on top of it. And as we were getting ready to exit the meeting, I looked at the two developers and I said, are we all clear on, I just thought of it as they were walking out of the room. If you have as a leader, have ever had this happen to you where you just think, shoot, I'm just going to ask about this just before we leave because I have this gut feeling there's maybe something not right here. So right as they were going to leave, because we had already had the meeting, I said to them, "Does everyone know what they're going to do when they leave this room? Is everyone good?" And everyone went, "Yep, we're good, perfect." And I go, "Hey, to the first engineer, I said, hey, just for my sake, when you go back to your desk, what are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do when you get back to your desk? What's your approach?" And the first thing he did was stared at the floor. So he started by staring at the floor. And then he kind of sheepishly looked up at me and he said, Jennifer, I'm not sure. And so what we learned from this is, I think someone's not muted. See if I can mute them. Oh, We're going to mute a few people if you guys heard them. Sorry about that. So what we saw in that situation was basically that even though he had told me he was good to go, when I asked the question, he was like, honestly, he goes, I'm not super sure, Jennifer. I was going to go back to my desk. I was going to think about it a little bit, maybe wait a half hour and come back in and ask you and then be like, hey, I'm confused. What do I do? And then I looked at the other engineer and I said, hey, how about you? What were you planning to do? And he said, you know what? I need to be honest. I was in the same boat. I was going to go back to my desk. I was going to think about it for a little while. Probably wait a half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, come back in and ask you and get more clarity. So we as leaders, if we connect our teams and we ask these questions, even if, we've already given direction and then they've said, yep, they get it, just to ask the follow-up question and say, hey, what does that mean to you? What are you really going to do? And have the conversation. And it's not a bad thing for them to be able to come to you and say, I really don't know. Because by them being more open about the fact that they don't know and being honest when they're, in times of need where they're just like, I'm struggling. If they come to us early in the struggle, instead of continuing to linger and struggle on and on for hours or days, even, we're wasting that time as a team and as a company, right? We're not as productive. And this is what this is saying is if we can really get our teams comfortable with coming forward when they don't know, with knowing who to go to, who their support people are, that is going to speed us up and you will have a much higher performing, higher velocity team than other teams in organizations. So you will see the output if you can achieve this. This is something often very underlooked by leaders is how do you build, to Nithia's point, building that trust and partnership so that you're working together to achieve it and you're able to rely on each other and you feel highly connected to one another. The other thing I've seen teams do, and this may not work for your organization, but one of the things that Google does and several of the other big tech companies, they actually use part of Monday as what they call a reset day. So because people have holidays, family things, weekend time, we all probably know it. Sometimes we go into Monday a little sluggish. We're not quite ready to get going with all the hard tasks. So what they do on Monday is they use it as a reset. So instead of working on something new, they come back to something that maybe they had done the last week or the week prior, and they use it as a way to focus on older stuff, to use your brain to reset you basically from that weekend mode to work mode basically, and creating this actual reset inside your brain, physically understanding you're back at work, those types of things. And a lot of companies would say, oh gosh, that's such a waste of time if we do a reset and we lose, basically those couple of hours and people are working on other stuff. But the idea is if we go back and look at old problems, like not current new stuff, but stuff we looked at prior with fresh eyes on our reset day, sometimes we find better approaches or strategies to things we looked at in the past if we take them back up and look at them again. So just another idea for you guys to think about in terms of a reset day or a reset hour or something like that inside of your teams, if it's possible. The other thing I put on here was 2 resources for you as leaders. The one on the left is a book. So the book is The Art of Connected Leadership. If you haven't read that book yet, I recommend it. Great book for leaders on how to do more of that connecting inside of your teams. So I would recommend taking a look at that book. The other resource is at the bottom of the screen. This is Show Me the Money, and this is the ROI study of employee engagement. And this is where that connectivity and engaged employees, there is a huge return on investment if your teams and your employees and team members are highly engaged. We want highly engaged team members. The way that we achieve that and do that is by having the capability to have, you know, that type of engagement that we need, which requires some work and effort on your part as the leader and some time from the team to do some things to gain that trust, to build that partnership. But that takes time. So a lot of times you want to be able to show the ROI and explain to your senior executives and leaders why you're having your team spend time on things like, you know, these activities to connect them and ensure that they're highly connected. You're spending extra time talking with the team and making sure that they're okay and understand their tasks and what they're supposed to be doing. Those types of things are all important and actually lead to a better ROI in your organization and team. All right, we're going to move on from this one. 2 resources on here though. Make sure you jot down those resources for yourself so you have them. Now, I started to talk about this with those questions you ask yourself as a leader. One of the key things for all of us right now, oh yeah, and another good point. So in the chat, we just saw that a lot of teams are starting their sprints on a Wednesday to accommodate the reset. That's exactly right? Where you're not starting new right at the beginning of a week and asking people to do something new or work on a new task. You start that midweek when people are well into their routine and schedule. They're ready to take on something new and their brains are firing on a much higher capacity level, which is exactly why you'll see these strategies. But good strategy in case you're in a team that maybe doesn't do that, to think about that and see if that just making those tiny tweaks, like moving your sprints to start on Wednesdays instead of Mondays, for a lot of teams, you will see actual dramatic impact to productivity when you can make just these, you know, little tweaks to the team and their way that they operate and how they are connected to when they start new projects versus when they get to look at stuff they've already looked at, and their ability to focus. So some of those things really highly impactful with small changes or tweaks. And then what I would say to all of you right now, and we'll get into some of the statistics of this as well so you can see it, but the trend we're in right now, and it's a new industrial revolution. So we've had industrial revolutions in the past. When we get dramatically new technologies and access to those technologies, it causes a shift or an industrial revolution. When we do that, it's impactful in the sense that we now have new access to new technologies, but it means learning new skills. And one of the things we know right now is that from here on out, we are constant learners. Like new skills will come up all the time. Technology is moving at a pace faster than we've ever seen it before, and the adoption of those new strategies and technologies. So what that means for all of us is we have to get comfortable with change and the uncomfortable because it's continually in flux and change. So it's resetting ourselves to be more comfortable with that change coming at us very frequently. So how you stay grounded, again, one of the strategies I learned early on in my career from other C-level executives was that you have to find your personal board of directors. So companies we've all heard of have their personal board of directors. Companies use that board of directors to help guide and direct them and give them advice so that when things change or you get into a difficult period, when there is financial constraints, when there's a market collapse, all of those types of things, that's when they're using that board of directors to help them guide and pivot and make decisions and determinations on how they want to move forward. So really important for you as a leader, if you want that same level of success or hope to achieve different levels in your career, to look to find your personal board of directors. You want to have that group of people advising you, helping you look at new opportunities, looking at where you can go in your career, looking at the opportunities ahead of you and assessing whether it's a good or bad opportunity, whether you should make that move to that new company or stick it out, what's worth it, what is your, helping you understand what your market value is, what you should be paid in the industry, all these types of things. So you have to start seeing yourself, no matter who you are, I believe, as you are the CEO and chair of your company, which is You Inc. And how you architect your team that's around you as your personal board is very, very important. So there's a lot of YouTubes on this. There are a lot of videos on how to create a personal board of directors. This is not just Jennifer saying, do this. This is something that's incredibly impactful, especially right now, when lots of us aren't able to be in front of our leaders or other executives in our companies on a day-to-day basis and see them in the office. Creating this board of directors who can help you get that visibility, advise you on what you need to do, those types of things, really impactful. What you want to do with this personal board of directors, there's a strategy. I was going to see if I put a slide in. If you guys are interested during the break, I'll put it up for you or put a link to it. But it basically shows a picture of how to start building this board. So for example, my personal board of directors has an individual I've known since I was young. So why I have that person is they know who I am since I was about 3 and 4 years old. I started my first company at 5. I was very young when I learned I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I have someone that knew me then that sits on my board of directors because she knows who I was as a child. She's watched me through my career, through university, through, all the different things I've done. And she can always ground me on my core values and who I am as a person, because she's known me from when I was very young. They say that we are most ourselves from the ages of birth, obviously, but up to about 8 and 9 years old, when we start to change who we are to fit the world around us. Lots of us start shifting and changing what we like and don't like based on influences from friends or the media or other people. But when we're young, if you think about when you were young, so just think for a second about when you were really young, what you wanted to do, what you liked to do, what you cared about. And that's when we're most often authentically ourselves. So think about that for a second. But I would encourage you to have someone from that time period in your life on your board. I would encourage you to get a leader you admire. So even if it's someone you don't know, reach out to them on LinkedIn or other places. Many leaders are very willing to spend time to help and mentor and pay it forward to other new leaders coming up through their careers. So find someone you admire in their skills. I would find someone who's good at things you're not good at. I always have a person on your board, like say, for example, you're extremely good at technical skills, but you're not great at financials, or you're extremely good at financials, but you're not good at operations. Find someone who has a skill you don't have, because they will give you advice that balances some of your, what you could call growth areas or weak spots, and have them help you. So, and again, looking for these people to build your board is really important, and setting times aside to meet with these people as a group. So I actually have meetings with my board of directors, especially when I have key decisions to make around a company or a direction or any of those things. Just like boards meet 4 times a year on average for publicly held companies, you should be meeting with your board a couple of times a year as well. And if you want more insight on this, I will drop in the chat, like I said, a way to get started on creating your board, and then also some videos from YouTube so that you guys can see it. The other thing we're seeing as a trend now with AI and the new technologies, AI has such far-reaching implications that what we're looking for, and what many companies are looking for, is not just people who understand the business that they're in, but understand the global impact. So with AI and with the new technologies, it's not a small impact anymore that it's having on the world. It has an impact potentially on other things around you, and things that impact future of work, things that impact people's future career opportunities. This AI impacts whether or not people are getting loans, whether or not people are getting credit, whether or not they're getting approved for homes and mortgages. There's all kinds of things this impacts. So the world really is looking for leaders, not just business experts, but leaders who understand the bigger impact on the world of the technology that's being implemented. There are many discussions going on across the globe around algorithms and regulating the algorithms for accuracy, so that these algorithms being used have to adhere to a certain level of accuracy before they're deployed, especially deployed broadly to be used in technology that impacts humans across the planet. The other thing we're seeing happen is, besides algorithm making sure that those algorithms are accurate, is they're talking about, for technology professionals, having basically the same kind of thing they have for doctors in their profession, which is a code of conduct that basically states, are you ethical, right? Doctors have an ethical code of conduct they must maintain around being ethical in their practices. You can start to see, when we look at some of the new technology being developed, wanting technologists building technology to be ethical in how it's being built and deployed in the world. So if it's not being built in a way that's ethical, that there is an obligation by the technologist, the manager, the leader, whoever it is that's aware of it, to come forward and tell people that it wasn't done ethically, right? One example I can think of recently was the technology that was being used for a rapid commuter train in California. They were building a new line for a rapid train for commuters in the state of California to move people very rapidly from the suburbs into the cities with a lower carbon footprint, so they weren't in their cars creating more exhaust and all of those things. But there was a technical engineer on the project that was concerned about the testing being done, that there had been some inconsistent test results around the safety of this train over a certain miles per hour or over a certain speed, and that over a certain speed it wasn't performing with the consistency it should. And now, right now, we don't have those standards. What do you do in that situation, right? It's easy to say we would tell someone, but when that's your job, when you're worried that you'll be fired if you tell someone that your bosses won't allow you to continue working, that it'll impact your family, it's a tricky situation. So as we get into more of these complex technologies, they're looking at ways to create safe spaces more and more for ethical standards of the technology that we're building and creating because of its impact to the world. This industrial revolution is called the rise of the relationship worker. So I'm going to show you the skills that you need, and these skills are different than what was used in the last portion of where we were for our industrial revolutions. The term is around really focusing and honing in on how you build, sustain, maintain, and create meaningful relationships with other groups or people to get the work done that you need to get done in your organization. So I mentioned we've had industrial revolutions in the past. The first industrial revolution was around the 1800s. There was another one around the 1900s when we saw some of the new electricity, lights, those things. We had our third one around the early 2000s, Y2K. We all probably may have heard about it or are aware of it, at least, if nothing else. And then we had our fourth industrial revolution that started in 2018, just a few years ago, as widespread adoption of AI, smart devices, smart technology, Internet of Things, which just means connected devices, as we all know, started to become more and more prevalent in our world. And we're using voice more often, all of these different assistants, those types of things. So this is where we sit today, and it's going to continue. So as you see, here's what's really interesting. 1800s, Industrial Revolution. Second one, 1900s. You went 100 years before you had one. Now, between the 2000s and the third and the fourth, you are looking at 18 years. We're shrinking that gap and it continues to shrink. This is what I mean about being continual learners. We're no longer in, you could go your whole career without massive change. We're now in a space where you're not going to go your whole career without massive change. You are going to have change just based on the fact that things are moving so much quicker in the world that we all live in right now. So that means us as leaders have to adapt much quicker and be able to pivot much faster than what we've seen in the past. All right, I mentioned at the break, I will give you some resources for some videos. I'm going to give you a clip I want you to watch. The movie is called Coded Bias. I'm just going to drop the clip in the chat in a second here for you guys to take a look at while we take our break. I want you to watch that if you can in another tab on your device. If anyone has issues watching the video or can't see the clip, just message me in the chat. But here's another thing to note for your teams. Having hour-long meetings without breaks, we just can't do it anymore. Our brains move too quickly. Even right now, most of you, while listening, are probably multitasking on 2 or 3 other things. You've got distractions and other stuff going on. So what we want to do is take more frequent breaks so our brains have time to process the information we just got and then to reset and get new information. When we just shove information in and we keep people sitting for hours at a time in meetings, they're not actually listening and hearing the information the way they need to retain it. So what we're going to do right now as a group, and I'll drop it in the chat to everyone, we are going to take a perfect. Someone was saying they always set 25 or 50-minute meetings, which is perfect because you're allowing people that extra 5 minutes or that 10 minutes to be able to reset, like reset between meetings so that they can get themselves ready for the next thing. If we set meetings at 30 minutes or an hour, people realistically, especially working from home right now, are going back to back to back. Sometimes our team members aren't getting a break and they'll end up sitting in front of their computer staring at the screen for 8-10 hours without ever moving. So we want to make sure we're giving people breaks, that you're getting breaks. So we are going to take a 12-minute break. We are going to come back at 1 minute past the hour. So I'll give you an extra minute because the time just changed. We're going to take a 12-minute break. Oh, I love walking meetings. Walking meetings are one of my favorites too. So I think if everyone knows, someone just mentioned walking meetings, and I love walking meetings where you set specific meetings to walk and talk. So you're getting movement. We also, as humans, are a lot more creative when we're having movement or flow. So if you can do a couple walking meetings a day, those are brilliant as well. But we will take, as I mentioned, a 12-minute break. So now I ate into your 1 minute by talking. So we'll come back at 2 minutes past the hour. We'll give you guys 12 minutes to get up, walk, take a break, do whatever. I will put a short clip in the chat. You can go get up, move around. The clip will take you about 1.5 minutes to watch. So you'll still have plenty of time to relax, reset, and we'll come back here at 2 minutes after the hour. Perfect. See you guys in about 12 minutes. I'll post in the chat. We'll start at 2 minutes after the hour. All right, everyone, we're going to come back in a few minutes, but if you're listening, we have about 3 minutes remaining on our break. I did drop into the chat some homework. If you're back from your break, you should see in the chat a link to Coded Bias, the video. So if you could take, it's about 2 minutes, 20 seconds. So if you want to watch that now, you have 2 minutes, almost 3 minutes to watch that. I also put in a link for a 6-minute video to watch at another time that has information on building your personal board of directors. And we'll talk real quickly in a second here when we resume, just a little bit about that as we finish up on our Industrial Revolution slide. So a couple minutes before our break formally ends. And we will be back shortly, but you have some things in the chat if you want to check out the items in the chat as well. All right, we are back online. So we will take off from where we started. So for those of you that maybe dropped off and came back, I'm going to repaste the video homework in the chat. So I pasted 2 videos into the chat prior to this. One is the coded bias video, and one is a video on how to build your personal board of directors. So hopefully you guys have access to those and are able to watch those. Please let me know in the chat if anyone can't access the if you're not able to access the videos I put into the chat or need access to them, let me know. But those are impactful in the sense that one of them talks about your personal board of directors and how to get started with that, which we talked about in the first part of this session for leaders. And where this comes into play is as this technology is changing and adapting so quickly, it's helpful for you to have a way to communicate and get feedback on the strategies you're taking for you in your career. So want to make sure again that everyone can see that. Anyone have any issues with the chat? Just want to check that you guys could see them in the chat. I'm repasting them if you just joined. One of the downsides of this is when you join, you lose the chats. So hopefully you guys can see those, and we've got those in there for you. Perfect. So you've got the 2 chats. Now let's talk really briefly. I did want to bring you back to personal board of directors and how that works. So this is one way to think about it. When you build your board, you want different kinds of leaders. So we kind of have this one grayed out, but it's basically a mentor, a sponsor, a critic. The critic is the one I mentioned before, where they think about the world differently than you do. So you don't want people that just see the world the way you see it. You want people who are going to challenge, question, do things differently, give you different advice, feedback. So you want the critic. You want a peer, someone who's in a similar place to you, aspiration, confidant, expert, connector. So these are just examples of who could sit on your board. You may not have all of them. You may want 3 or 4 of these. That I always do the aspiration. That's the person I'm looking at and saying, I value their opinion. I value how they operate as a leader. I want to operate like that. So aspirational, really important. I would always keep that one for sure. The other one I think is really important is the connector. Who knows people that you maybe don't know that can help connect you to others? I always have the sponsor. So the person that I've known forever in my life is really important to me. And then someone you see as a mentor. So those are the 4 that I would pick. Along with, sorry, I missed the critic. I would have them in there too. So I would do those 5. But you guys can pick the ones that make sense for you, but just another way to look at how to get started with that. And we'll talk later about examples of why that's so important. But the age we're in right now is we're going to start to see us managing more and more, instead of people or teams, to start managing bots or algorithms. So I'll show you some stats around some different work that's been done that say what the new jobs of the future are. Where people always get worried in this regard is what happens to my job? And the reality is of what we're seeing so far around future of work is the majority of jobs get enhanced. Most of us right now don't have enough time to do all the work that we have in a day. And so a good chunk of jobs will actually get improved or enhanced by utilizing some of these more advanced technologies. Then there is going to be a percentage of jobs that are brand new. Just like if we would have said 5 to 7 years ago, the whole gig economy and things like delivery drivers on demand and people who bring you food deliveries and all kinds of deliveries for different things, and all of these gig economy companies that popped up, those are all examples of new jobs that we didn't think of before that are now invented because of the technologies we have access to. And then some of the rote routine tasks that we're doing will get replaced, but these were the lower non-value add tasks anyways. These were things, so think about anything you do every day that a machine could easily take over and do. Those are the types of things that are getting replaced. There is a book, and that book reference is at the bottom of the slide, What to Do When Machines Do Everything. So if you want to check out that book reference, that is a great reference for people in terms of if you're looking at the future and when machines start to do more jobs. That's a great one to read just to see what some of the skill sets are more in detail around what's going to be needed. We'll talk about that, but you know, we only get 2 hours today. We don't get 2 days. But the good news, almost 90% of what we're seeing is either enhanced or invented. The majority of it is either enhanced or invented, not replaced, which is always the fear. And there is a white paper out there. It's like a pamphlet you can download from online. It's called Jobs of the Future. There's more and more of these coming out. But this is just one example out of that little booklet. It's available online. It's free. You can download it. You don't have to pay for it. What to Do When Machines Do Everything is a book. You would need to purchase that, but this is just available online. And one of the things it talks about is the fact that humans are going to manage machines. So it's human machine teaming managers, a lot more than humans managing other humans. So this is a trend. It's already taking off in some of the larger tech companies, where the humans are responsible for taking care of the machines and looking at what the machines are doing and making sure that it's accurate, that they're getting the right outcomes, that things make sense, all of those things. So a key element or component to this is this human machine teaming manager as one example, but there's many more jobs out there. Download this pamphlet. It'll give you some insights into some other jobs that are coming up and some things that are shifting in our world because of the technology, because of the AI that's out there, and that we're seeing. The other thing is, it was mentioned earlier, but a lot of Agile teams have already seen this. So what does it mean to become a relationship worker? It means focusing more around these types of things. So individuals and interactions over systematic process and tools, right? Like when we truly connect and collaborate, like I said in the beginning, the outcome is far better than when we just focus on processes and tools alone without the connection and collaboration. So it's going to be a lot about individuals and interactions and how those work for us in our world. It's going to be about working software over tons of documentation. This is stuff many of us have already shifted to. It is what we're kind of used to now. But the big one to focus on here is it's going to be about collaboration with our customers, responding to change. You know, things are going to move a lot quicker, but relationship workers and being a leader in the age of relationship workers is about individuals and interactions. How well do you know your team? How well are you optimizing what your team is focused on and what they're working on over just what's the process and the tools all the time of how you get it done. So what do we do better? And this is where us as leaders need to really make sure that we're educating and communicating with our teams and that they're focused on the right types of tasks and skills. So what we don't want to lose is our ability as humans to be creative, collaborative, do these problem-solving tasks, to be able to use our level of contextualized intelligence when we see something. So I mentioned it earlier, but hopefully you guys watched during the break the coded bias video. What that shows us is that algorithms aren't always incredibly accurate. And when they're not accurate, what happens is there's an impact to the end consumer and the people that are receiving the outcome or product of that algorithm. One example of that is a lot of times what happens when we feed in data, it just gives us patterns or similar results to our past. But if we're trying to evolve from our past to have a different outcome, we need humans to utilize contextualized intelligence to change the outcome by understanding the nuances of what it means to be involved in terms of that algorithm and the accuracy of that algorithm. The other thing algorithms right now don't have is empathy. So they don't have the ability to understand in a given or particular situation why something may look one way or another and understand the nuances around that situation instead of just taking it as a pure data exercise. And then also as humans, data should tell stories. We want it to tell the story of what's actually happening and communicate what's going on. In technology as leaders, it's our job to communicate to people who don't understand the technology, whether it be our customers or our business partners or other stakeholders in the organization, what the implication of utilizing technology in a particular way does for us. So you want to have that skill or that muscle of being able to tell stories. Now, many of us focus the majority of our time on our technical skills or technical muscle, which is important. We need that. But we're also in the similar way losing, because that's where a lot of us are comfortable, is our technical skills. We sometimes negate or don't spend time on the other muscles we have to build, which is these things like creativity, contextualized intelligence, and empathy. So what we want to think about is, how do we as leaders balance people's skills to make sure that we not only have technically competent and capable resources, but that they're using these other skills to analyze the data, because a lot of those technical tasks of just building can be done through intelligent automation, it can be done through AI, but what those things can't do is the things that only humans can do. So you start to draw conclusions about those people that shift to have some of these more what they call fuzzy instead of technical skills, but these types of skills will become increasingly valuable as a lot of those technical routine rote tasks become completed by bots, algorithms, all kinds of other things that are available. So I'm going to give you some resources. A lot of this session is about, we only get 2 hours to talk about these things and for me to give you information. So a lot of what I like to do is to provide you information to make sure that you have some references beyond here to gain some more insights and some thoughts when you leave here today, to, if you have some of that spare free time that you're now not able to, go out and do as many things with social activities and other stuff as many of us have seen in the last year. Our social activities, our other stuff has changed. We have some more capacity and time to do some things like catch up on our reading, take a class, do some other things. But these are some of the things that I mentioned earlier. So just to recap, if you want to take one picture of all the resources in one place, the pamphlet, 21 Jobs of the Future, that one is free. It is available on the internet if you just Google it or search it. What to Do When Machines Do Everything is a book that is available on Amazon. It's also available on other downloadable if you use Audible or any of the Kindle, those types of things. Humans Are Underrated. So this is about talking about what we need to know that machines will never know, and some of those skills again. So not just taking my word for it, but reading some of these books that teach you this is kind of where the whole world is, of how do we, and you're hearing a lot of talk about this right now, how do we transform education so that we take into account better and more adequately preparing young people for the world that they'll enter, which is going to be dramatically different even than what we see today. So we want to have that capability to prepare our young people. So that's why you're hearing tons, if you look across the globe, at the United Nations level, at the global level, at the individual country level, around how does education get modified and transformed to basically adapt to what we're seeing out here. Now, I'm going to give you several of these surveys that were done, at least one, if not two today, but there's many more out there, where they surveyed, many of us use LinkedIn. So I'm assuming some of you use LinkedIn, you're familiar with it. LinkedIn CEO was at Davos in the World Economic Forum right before the world started to shut down for the pandemic in 2020, and then going into that. And this is what they had predicted without having, and this was just on the cusp of this. But again, there was a lot of people for a long time who said at some point we were going to see some type of global crisis on this scale, through a disease or a pandemic. We've had these in the past that have impacted different geographies, different countries, but this one really impacted all of us globally. And what we saw was that the top soft skills in demand, and this was for employers who were seeking tech candidates. So these aren't regular jobs, these are tech jobs. So employers who are looking for candidates for skilled tech jobs, what they wanted for skills, their number one thing that they needed was creativity. They wanted to make sure that anyone they were hiring could demonstrate their ability to be creative and problem solving, which panned out to be even more critical over the next year when you went into the situation where what worked before maybe wasn't going to work for you again or work the way that it had in the past. So you needed to be able to use that creativity or that problem solving to be effective. So creativity was number one. Persuasion. That's the storytelling we mentioned in the earlier slide. So persuasion is all about being able to get your point across and making sure people understand what you're asking them to do and why you're asking them to do it. The next one is collaboration. So again, reverting back to one of those first slides I showed you, teams who are better connected are more productive. So what they want is people who are really good at getting into a team, being part of a team, being part of that collaboration and working well together as a group to accomplish a goal. Adaptability. They want people to be able to pivot, change, and move as needed in the organization. So they don't want people who go, this is what I do, this is the only thing I want to do. They want individuals in their organizations who are able to be adaptable and move with the shifting times and what is needed. And then emotional intelligence. So we've heard this one for a while, but what they're looking for is people who can read the situation and adapt. You're going to run into situations, I'm sure all of you have with your teams and your employers, where you have to utilize your own skills and emotional intelligence to be able to say, this is working or this isn't working. How would this work? What are we going to do with this? And you use your emotional intelligence to gauge the situation for those individuals when they're needing something from you as a leader. So interesting, like again, this was surveyed. LinkedIn has the most jobs posted of anywhere right now on the internet in terms of if someone is looking to hire, that's where they're going. They're going to LinkedIn to post these opportunities. And this was tech jobs, the 5 skills they wanted to see for tech jobs across the board, no matter who was doing the hiring, this is what they wanted. So we should be taking into account this because again, I think lots of us as leaders in the tech space focus solely on, can you code? What type of coding can you do? What are you able to do with coding? How advanced are you? But what's going to happen as AI and smart automation take over, more and more of that will be done automatically through the systems and programming that we have available to us, where again, when you look at traditional automation is you write code, the code does something. It's very static. It's what I told it to do, it did. With AI, what happens is you build in the capability to have learning. So you write code, it runs through and does things, but then it's going to have different results than what you coded for. So it's not a one-for-one, it's a one-to-many when you start to leverage AI in there and it's learning, there's training data sets it looks at, you see the outcome, you do retraining. There's lots of things that go on with that where it is more advanced than just static implementation of what you write is what happens. For example, when you're using that AI now, it's able to identify on the screen, for example, a picture. And if that picture is in the right place, and if that picture moved to another place, it doesn't stop because it doesn't have to be just in the top right corner. It's looking across the entire page to find that picture. Those types of things start to occur. So that's where humans need to guide and aid the tools and the technology and the machines in the work that they're doing in that regard. Fostering collaboration. So collaboration being one of those key points that was brought up on the previous slide. Again, what I seek to do in a lot of these sessions is provide ongoing resource and access to tools that you guys can take from here and utilize later on in your teams. So there is a link at the bottom. The website is Collaboration Superpowers, 247 of the ultimate list of virtual team building activities. Many of us were remote. When I asked earlier in the session who's remote and who's in person, lots of us are still remote. So this is ways for you to get creative about connecting your team, even though you're not able to be in person and see them physically, that you can do this remote collaboration with your team. So there's different ways to do this, but this is really important. I know for a lot of us, we get on a lot of these video calls or sessions. We're not turning on our cameras. We don't often get to say much. And what we want to make sure we do is have that connectivity, at least inside of our teams, where we are turning on our cameras, we're looking people in the eye, we're having those conversations. It's so impactful and meaningful. We've all probably seen this when we could all be together in pre-pandemic, and I'm seeing this now as we are getting back out to meet with people in person. You can have a ton of calls, conversations on the phone, but when you actually get to meet those people face to face and you see their eyes and how it works, it's a very different experience than when you're completely remote. So it is important to build those connections as best you can, even when we're remote like this. And then I do know that lots of us who are technical don't always love networking. That's not one of our favorite things. A lot of times when we say networking, many of us go, oh, not something I'm interested. But here's what, and I talked about this a little bit, but little things can make a big difference. And the tipping point talks about that. When you look at the world in a different way, when you have empathy and you can see something from someone else's perspective. So instead of going into a conversation where you know the other person holds a different belief or viewpoint than you, instead of going in, many of us, this is how we are wired as humans, we go into conversations with what we want to say. So think about conversations at home. Think about conversations with significant others, with your children, with your spouse, anyone that's in your life, family members. We usually go into those key conversations, if they're crucial conversations for us, we go in with what we want to get across. We go in with our perspective and our point of view. And what happens is we're so focused on what we want to say that we a lot of times don't hear what the other person needs us to hear or their perspective. So one small thing we can do as a leader to make a difference is, instead of walking in with a preconceived notion or knowing what we want to say, is having these conversations with family members, employees, workers, whoever it is, where we just open up with, tell me a little bit about where you're at right now. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? And hearing. Like, just really take it in and don't formulate what you want to say. And I always say, count to 10 in your head. So you're not focused on what you're going to say. You're thinking about what they're saying, and listen. So listening is such a crucial skill to understand what needs to be done. So listening first versus talking first, right? Think about that. Then the next thing is, the world is getting a lot smaller in terms of our opportunities are getting bigger. The world's becoming truly more digital and distanced and global. Now, many companies, because of what we saw over the last 18 months, are not requiring that their people work or be near their corporate office. They're truly opening up to hiring all over the globe and having a more global workforce. So one of the things to do is to network. So they say there's something that is called mirror neurons in our brain. So if you have not heard this term before, the term is mirror neurons. Check that out later on. But what that basically means for all of us as humans is that our brains mirror the 5 people we spend the most time with. So if you're spending a lot of time around a certain type of person who maybe is negative, isn't productive, is giving off lots of negative energy, those types of things, watch who you're associating with or around, because we mirror what we see, even if it's not conscious. Think about it this way. We were having a conversation with some clients this week already earlier, and one of the individuals happened to say, it's funny, my wife has been watching these murder mysteries, horror movies, crime shows right before bed, and she can't sleep at night. She needs the light on. Like, this is a grown adult, right? But what's happening is that mirror neuron. where if right before we go to sleep or we're trying to focus on something, if we're distracted by these things like horror movies and murder mysteries, that's all you can think about is murder mysteries, horror movies, all the bad things that could happen. So one key of the tipping point, and I would give, not inside that, but just from my own perspective of changing the dynamic for you in your organization or with your team, is whatever, if you have key meetings, if you have critical client meetings or critical things you're going to do, make sure whatever you're focused on before that is, even if it's just a positive song, positive music, something that helps you. If it's looking at something where you were really successful, a note you got from someone saying how great you did, something that helps put you in the right frame of mind to have success in that meeting you're going into. Super important. Make sure you do that. The next thing is you use LinkedIn and a lot of these networking opportunities to meet new people. Conferences, events like this, they give us the opportunity to connect to others. We now don't have to physically go to a meetup. We don't physically have to be in the building. We can do these things and fit them in with the rest of our schedule. That may not be as good because we love meeting people in person, but at least do some of these networking things online. And I always like to say, give yourself a goal of meeting X number of people a month. Maybe it's, maybe you don't do any now. And so meeting 2 new people a month on LinkedIn would be good. Maybe you already do a couple, up it by a few more. But try and network with a few new people, because as you're building your career or looking for your next opportunity, having those connections will make it much easier to reach out to get that next job, that next promotion, that next thing you're looking for. So you want to use this time to grow your network. People are going to change jobs more than we ever have before, and move around a lot more. It's going to be a lot less likely people have these legacy careers where they stay forever in a certain position or job. So make sure you're growing your network now and building those connections. This is CEO of Women Unlimited, this Dr. Rosina. She talks about self-isolation, like we saw during this last 18 months, is a good time to build that personal board of directors. So if you're still in it, do it. Make sure you do that. Attend these virtual meetups, webinars, build that board of directors. We're not constrained by where we live, so reach out and do some of these new things. It'll be good for all of us. I talked about empathy being one of the skills that employers are looking for and want to see in their employees. So one thing that empathy is about is not seeing the world just through your perception or your view, but really looking at it. And I love this illustration because it's so true in this situation, where you can see literally, depending on which side of the number you stand on, you will see a different number. So one of these individuals sees a 9, the other individual sees a 6. Neither of them is wrong, right? They both are right from where they stand. But to have empathy for others, I have to make sure I go, oh, they may have a different reality than I have. What does it look like to stand over there? So, it's literally, I think about it as in your head, walking yourself over to the other side, understanding and getting information and seeking why they see something that way. And really making sure you understand that perspective, and vice versa. Like when we have healthy relationships and connected teams, I'm sure many of you have run into this in your teams or your organizations, where 2 people have very different views about how to proceed. They have 2 very different views about how we want to go forward with a project, how they want to code it, how they want it to look, right? And they're different from the way we would do it. So one of the important things is to seek to understand, where you actually listen to why they would do it the way they're doing it, because more times than not, we have intelligent people in our teams. We hire smart people because they are smart and they have a good perspective. And you want to hear that, because by listening to it, it may alter where we're coming from and give us a better way to move that forward, or another idea about how to do it more optimally in our team or with our group. So empathy in leaders, one of the key things. When we send messages to teams and we are talking to them, it's really critical how you talk to them about what you need. And so when we say things as leaders, like, how do I get the most out of my team and people? You're utilizing them not as a person, but you're seeing them as a function or a unit to produce what you need. What we want to do as empathetic leaders is ask, how can I help you be at your best? How can I empower and enable you to be the best person you can be in the situation to be able to help our organization move forward? That's what you want, is how do I remove roadblocks? How do I help and enable and empower you to be successful in what you're doing? That's what we're there to do. Now, the next challenge we have as leaders now in the current age that we're in, we have a lot of short attention span. So many of us, a 2-hour session like this, it's hard to sit through, right? We maybe can't do it anymore. Even if we could have done it 2 years ago, there's some people that just can't do it now because our attention span has gotten so short. And we move on to things really quickly, and we don't have the capacity because we've stopped training our brains to be able to sit longer than a certain period of time. So the key to that is changing up how you offer communication to your employees to get them to pay attention and to land the message you need. So we're going to watch a short video. I'm just going to make sure that the sound works. So let me just take a second to make sure that I optimize for video clip. All right, I'm going to play the sound. If you guys can't hear it, please let me know in the chat. Sound fair?
They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's as true in business as it is for everything else in life. So why do visuals communicate better than words? First off, images take less time to process than text. Research at 3M Corporation concluded that we process visuals 60,000 times faster than text. 93% of our communication is nonverbal, and most people are visual learners. That's because we more easily remember new and different things when they are presented visually. Visual communication is just far more effective, and web traffic and social media trends support this. Publishers who use infographics grow in traffic an average of 12% more than those who don't. On Facebook, photos perform best for likes and shares as compared to text, video, and links. Pinterest, a highly visual social media platform, generates more referral traffic for business than Twitter, Google+, YouTube, and LinkedIn combined. So whether communicating for yourself or your company, you're better off communicating visually.
All right. So you guys hopefully could hear that. I didn't see anyone say you couldn't, so I'm assuming we could hear. So the idea here is humans like visual communication, right? So they like to see pictures instead of words. Our brain processes that information much, much faster than we do words. So when we see a picture of an apple, we process that almost instantaneously. If I were to write you a paragraph about that apple, it would take you much longer to process that information. The idea for us as leaders is, how are we giving information to our team, and how are we giving information to stakeholders in the business? What we want to be able to do is give visuals as often as we can. So making sure that we are able to give them visuals to land the message more often and have them remember it. Key things, even metrics, if we can do metrics in pictures as opposed to text, people land and remember better. So executives, especially short attention spans, they don't have a ton of time. If you want them to remember what you're trying to communicate to them, giving them pictures and descriptions. One of the ways to do that is infographics, which are just pictures that depict what you're trying to tell them. The other way is mind maps. So a lot of us have heard of mind maps. If you are trying to remember things, if you're trying to map out what you want to do, or the process, or the opportunities, or the options, what we want to do is map that out in these mind maps. So again, the idea being, this just helps us remember things more effectively. So if you were to write out a paragraph about all the things you needed to do versus creating this mind map, the mind map would allow you to quickly remember all of the things that you needed to be able to do. So mind maps assist and facilitate in that process for all of us. So a little bit of homework for today, that things we should think about just in terms of our teams and at where we're moving in terms of the world with these new skills and new technologies that are being deployed and developed, is looking at in the age of the relationship worker, which we said we're now in this industrial revolution about becoming relationship workers. What relationship building behaviors do you need to develop? Are you doing a good job of building relationships, or are we just executing tasks? Is your team just executing tasks, or are they building relationships? So there's some things that we need to be able to develop both for ourselves and our team around relationship building. How else does relationship building change in a post-pandemic world? Are you going back to the office? Are you going to be hybrid? What is that going to look like for you and your teams in terms of how you will operate? You know, what will change? You guys may consistently choose, or companies may choose to live in a hybrid world. Some companies may go fully remote. Some companies may go back to in person, but there's going to be some changes that occur. And then looking at what new strategies, what new collaboration techniques for your teams, what things are you going to do to help adopt and free up capacity to allow for better decision making and more time in people's day. So the idea of all of this is we start to use some of these technologies like algorithms and AI and machine learning to free up bandwidth in all of us so that we have more capability to focus again on what we talked about earlier, which is, what do humans do better than machines? We need to be focusing on building those skills versus focusing on things that a machine could just as easily do for us, right? This is the traditional example of why we all wanted automation, and some automation. Automation can't do everything. But the way that I look at it now is that we should think of it in terms of tiers, where one tier is basically humans, and they're our most valuable resource in our organizations, and seeing what we should have human beings in the company or organization do. The next tier up above that we have is our automation, our traditional automation. So what does that do? But we all know when we have even traditional automation, there's a level of maintenance that occurs. So you want to make sure that it's the right thing and that the maintenance is reasonable before you automate that task. And is it the right task to be automated? And then you go up a level to AI and ML. And what is the right things for that? Because that may require less maintenance, but it does need some of our human beings to understand it, to be able to manage the automation and the AI and ML that we've injected into the organization, and how we're going to do that successfully. So those are some things to think about in terms of that. Now, we talked about today, you know, how do you become, and what's your leadership IQ, and how do you move in to being a relationship leader in the age of AI and all of this new technology? So the first thing is fostering collaboration inside your teams. I gave several different tools and resources for you to lean into around books, as well as page resources for how to build collaboration either in person or virtually for your teams. You need to focus on how do you build the appropriate relationships, both inside your team and your company, but also relationships around your board of directors and spinning that up. And then making sure that besides that, you also have relationships and you're networking externally so that you're connected into the ecosystem when you want that next opportunity or next job. One that we didn't touch as much on today, because we only had 2 hours, but is adopt a where I can help mindset. So shifting your mindset from here's what I need you to do to where can I help you? And when we lead with helping others be successful in their roles, that builds a lot of what I call collateral, so that at some point, if we need to cash in and need help from others to get something done we're trying to achieve, a critical project, a deadline, you know, anything that you have, everyone only has so much finite time in their day that they're able to spend on work and tasks. If you've been building up that collateral with others where you've said, where can I help? How can I be of assistance to you? And then you come back and say, hey, I need a favor, I need help. The likelihood that that person will put you ahead in the line is much higher than if you haven't been doing that. So it's going to allow you to get things done quicker and at a faster pace than you otherwise maybe would be able to do. The other thing I say is, we have to learn to build that trust. We heard this earlier from one of the individuals saying, having trust in your teams, building that trust, building that confidence is important. We need to be trustworthy where we're transparent as we can be with our teams on things. And then, learning to trust others and have them trust us is incredibly important. If we don't have trust in organizations, it's actually proven in many of the books we look at that the base of building block for a team is trust. If the team lacks trust, everything else falls down. There is not a lot you can do, and it's hard to be successful if you fundamentally lack trust in your organization. If you lack the feeling of partnership between leaders and their team members, you need that partnership, you need that trust. And then we're obviously going to continue to leverage technology to provide insights and data. And then look for ways to use AI creatively in your teams. There's a lot of cool technologies out there that we can utilize in our teams to help us leverage data to make and optimize humans' jobs easier. So instead of doing everything manually and doing all the regression testing and building data sets manually, look for ways to leverage data and insights and AI to help you do some of these tasks so that humans have more capacity to do what they do well, which is that contextualized intelligence, the relevance, the empathy, all of these other components and pieces. So those are just some summary things. Embrace the chaos. Don't overthink it. We're going to continue to change. And being a leader right now, it's going to be a chaotic world that we live in, and learning how to embrace that's important. There's a lot of skills we can get from looking and watching children. A lot of them are much more adaptable and flexible than we as adults tend to be. We've learned not to be as flexible and adaptable. But if we look at them and you observe them, you see their skill in being resilient and flexible and adaptable in ways that sometimes we don't have that same capacity. So celebrate and embrace your want tos, the choose, the I can't wait to list also. Make sure you don't forget about those pieces, because if we show up as better people right now and we're doing the things that balance us as humans, it makes us better leaders in the world as well. So we want to make sure we have those in there. I put in my information. My email is on the bottom right, my contact information. So you can contact me at jen@jenbonine.com. I have also got my website, which is jenbonine.com. And then obviously Red Rex, we have a website as well. But if you need to contact me, if you have further questions about things that we discussed or talked about today, please feel free to reach out to me and email with questions. I did drop those videos in the chat. I have other resources. So if there was something where you said, oh, Jennifer, that was good, but I need a little bit more info on this part or that part, I'm happy to share more information with you through email if that is helpful for you as well. So hopefully you guys have a great rest of the day. Hopefully this gave you some new things to think about, some new thoughts. I wanted to end, as I was talking to one of our friends in the chat, we wanted to make sure that you guys, just like we gave you the break, had a few minutes to transition between your next things. So we were going to end a few minutes ahead of the hour and give you a few minutes to transition to your next thing. But I will take questions if anyone has a few questions before we end. And then this should give you a few minutes in your day to think about some of the stuff we've learned. If you haven't had a chance to watch the videos in the chat, I recommend you watch at least the video on coded bias. It is a film on Netflix. It's available. You can go out there and watch it now. I would highly recommend it. It's a 90-minute movie that was made, a documentary about some of the new technology, the algorithms, facial recognition systems that are out there, and some other things. So take a peek at that if you haven't. I highly encourage you to do that before you move on with the rest of your day. I hope you again enjoyed this session. Please let me know if you need anything, and I will hold here for questions if anyone has them, if you want to come off mute and ask me something or anything like that. But thanks everyone for giving me a part of your day. I hope you have a great rest of your day.